Hi, folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money podcast. This is session number 421. Now, young families have lots of things to deal with, right? Even though my kids are 18 and 21 now, I still remember juggling childcare with work, making ends meet, wondering whether to move house, take on the extra mortgage, all that stuff. Now, my guest today is an expert in the field, Joe Okaly of New Horizons Wealth Management in New Jersey. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Hello, great to have you with me. Thank you so much for joining me. As ever, before we go any further, don't forget this podcast is brought to you with the help of my friends at 7 Investment Management. I'll put something about them down here, but huge thanks to them. Do check out what they're up to. They're at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. Now, my guest today, Joe Okaly, is a certified financial planner and a podcaster from over the pond in New Jersey. Sorry for everybody from that part of the woods for butchering the accent there earlier on. But Joe specializes in helping middle-class families make their lives more enjoyable through planning and financial education. He has his own podcast called Enjoy More 30s Family Finance, where he attempts to help young families learn the important concepts that, we were just never taught in school in order to free those families from anxiety and to make life more enjoyable. Joe himself is married to Lauren. They've got 2 young kids, Avery and Noah. And, if you are part of a young family yourself, if you have young kids, or maybe you're a grandparent to a young family, today's session is going to be both interesting and instructive. So remember, notes and links from today's show, they're at the show notes, which is the only link you need to remember, meaningfulmoney.tv/session421, meaningfulmoney.tv/session421. Here's my conversation with Joe Okaly. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Joe Okaly from the other side of the pond from where I'm sitting. Joe, it's great to have you here, man. Where are you speaking to us from?
I'm coming all the way from New Jersey, so we just get right across the pond, and then we go in a little bit further, but not too much past that.
Very cool. So Joe is certified financial planner with New Horizons Wealth Management. He's also a podcaster, which I'm going to talk to him a little bit later in the show. But Joe, do you want to just give us your origin story, really, man? Who you are, how you got to this point, a little bit about your journey and what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be able to be here today and connect with you, Pete. So, I grew up in New Jersey, born in New Jersey, still live in New Jersey. So I'm from the northern half. So we call ourselves, from North Jersey. Definitely don't want to be confused with people from South Jersey. No total offense, but so it's a commuter area. We're around 45 minutes outside of New York City. And, so a lot of people growing up, they would get on the train, they'd drive in, they'd go into New York. And so I kind of just assumed I would always do the same thing. Everybody around me is going into New York. So I'll probably go in, work on Wall Street, 100-hour weeks, all that kind of fun stuff. And so I go to college, also in New Jersey, and have a major in finance. And in one of my classes, a professor brings in this guy who says he's a financial planner. And I have no idea what the heck he's talking about, financial planning. And he's going through how he's using all this cool stuff that I enjoy in class with, stocks and insurances and, lumping in Excel and math. But he's actually helping real people. And then he's seeing real people have real results and making their lives better. And I was like, oh my God, like that's something I can actually do. I don't have to do this Wall Street commute. And so I immediately went out and tried to find an internship somewhere kind of in this realm. And so my mom found like a friend of a friend who hooked us up with New Horizons, and I got an interview to have an internship.
Amazing.
And so I go for the interview, and the funniest part is my college roommate at the time, his mom works at this very same firm. And so they didn't refer me in. Fate kind of was just determined and said, I don't care what path you take, but you're coming to New Horizons at some point. And so the owner of the firm, Bob Giraffe, he doesn't believe in coincidences. So I guess, there you go. I was destined to be here. And anyway, so, 13 years later, I'm still here. I'm 35 years old, running a 39-year-old wealth management firm. And, Bob has been, a mentor, father, he's godfather to my son.
Amazing.
So it's just like an amazing, amazing journey. Sometimes fate just really knows what it wants you to do, and it pushes you that way no matter what.
That is incredible, man. I mean, you couldn't write that, could you? I have to say, I think your professor, who brought in a financial planner one day, has probably done more for the industry than the industry over here has. We need to be doing that more. Do you know what I mean? Actually position what we do as an aspirational job option, career option, which we certainly over here we just don't. So we need to get much better at that. That's an amazing story, Joe. That's fantastic. I love it. Yeah. Definitely meant to be. Now, you have a clear passion from speaking to you for helping young families with their particular financial planning needs. So where does that focus of yours come from? What triggered it?
Sure. Yeah. So my passion for this kind of came from where a lot of people develop their passions from, and that's experiencing it firsthand. Right. So I'm married. I have 2 young kids, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. I'm very blessed. And what I found is, when I went from single to married to with kids, because I had to learn certain things from my job, I just implemented those things for myself too, So, we have clients at the firm that we've been helping with these things. And as with most wealth management firms, these clients are older, they're getting closer to retirement, whatever it may be. But a lot of those things fit perfectly for me too. So, I'm going to do a lot of those same things to save and protect. And I would go to family parties or friends' houses and I'd hear them speak, people in my similar situation. And I realized they had this kind of sense of, financial anxiety, or just like not quite sure where they're going or if they're doing anything they're supposed to be doing financially in life. And I really didn't have those feelings, And so I was kind of free to just focus on being the best father, the best, husband, the best son, best brother. Perfect. And these other people were not able to do it to the degree that I was. And it was simply because they didn't have the education. Sure. And I don't know, everybody I've talked to, whether in the US or otherwise, it seems to be a common theme that nobody is taught kind of any financial literacy growing up, sure. Even though we're all going to have jobs, we're all going to have incomes. Many of us are going to have families, and yet this is something that we're not taught. Shakespeare's on everything, but it's all well and good. But Shakespeare doesn't really help me much in financial planning, I have to say. No. So it was just kind of this realization about how fortunate I am, just kind of by dumb luck that my job just happened to prepare me for all this, and really just wanting to kind of share it with everybody else out there because of this big void that kind of exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a familiar recurring story so often, but you're right. We don't teach this stuff. We'll talk about the podcast in a little bit because that's one of the ways that you're bridging that gap. But I've done podcast seasons on life cycles and life stages and things like that. For young families, Joe, if you had to identify the single biggest challenge that young families face with their financial planning generally or whatever, what would you say that was?
Yeah, so it may sound kind of odd that this is the biggest challenge, but the biggest challenge that we come across with young families is their money mindset, just as a high 30,000 foot view kind of a thing. Huh. Because until you get that situated, how are you going to point the rest of it in the right direction? Sure. So if you break it up into kind of 3 parts, the first part is what I talked about with education. Nobody's getting any education, so it's really hard for them to do it on their own. The reason people are tuning in today to listen to you, and they listen to you every week, is because they weren't taught most of this stuff. The second thing is the lack of professionals, or the lack of help out there for them. So, I know growing up, we can't all learn everything about every single subject and be 100% self-sufficient, but there should be professional options for you. So, I don't want to know anything about plumbing, but I know I can call a plumber and they can fix my pipes. So with our profession, what we tend to see is that there's a lot of firms out there focused and specializing in retirement or pre-retirement people, because that's where the wealth is accumulated. And there's not many firms out there that are shouting from the rooftops, hey, we love helping young families, So you have this double hit with lack of education combined with maybe lack of professional advice. And what that leads to is a money mindset that is more focused on just accumulating numbers on pieces of paper. Sure. More money equals better. And I've heard you say it before, Pete, money is a tool. it's not really a goal in of itself. And so developing that mindset from an early age that says, my goal in life is not money, my goal in life is to make my life as enjoyable as possible, is just a huge flip. And if you think about people that are retiring, they are kind of allowed, or the natural progression or maturity is to kind of get to that mindset. So when somebody comes in to retire, they're not saying like, oh, I think I should probably keep working for the rest of my life just so I can get this number on this piece of paper really, really, really big. They're saying, I want to live. I want to go out on vacation. I want to do this or that. I want to experience things. And so it's this realization that kind of happened, but there's no requirement that it happens when you're 60. That can happen when you're 30. Yeah. You could put those things in order now. And so the example I like to give people to just try to illustrate this is that they have a choice. So like, let's say that you make $100,000, well, I guess it's pounds, but 100,000, let's say you make, and you get a job offer for 120, right? The normal default is definitely taking that job. Might be longer commute, might be more stress, more responsibility, but it's more money. So, I have to take it. I have to. And you just remove the choice from yourself. Whereas if you think about, if I were to make an extra $20,000 pounds a year, what would that do for me that I can't already do now? What would that open up? What would that free up for me that I'm not on a path to do right now? And so when you go through that exercise, you might still come up with something. It might be, well, now I could save more for my children that I wasn't able to, or maybe now I could retire a few years, earlier than I otherwise would be able to. And so there could be an answer to that, but at least go through the process, go through that question, because I would say you'd be surprised how often you might not really know, not come up with an answer. And that kind of says that maybe I should reevaluate this because I could be maybe jumping into it blindly, so to speak.
And better to think of it ahead of time than to regret it afterwards and have to unwind it and all that sort of stuff. I tend to talk about being intentional quite a bit, and that would be a very intentional way of looking at an opportunity like that, rather than just assuming, well, $20,000 more. That is itself a reason to switch. It just might not be. So, how do you help people make this mindset shift, or start to take on this mindset shift then, Joe?
Yeah, so I actually had a young family couple that I was in yesterday that was a kind of a perfect example of it. So, we're talking to them and they have 2 kids, 3rd kid on the way. The wife has a very successful business, 2 locations. And one of her goals that she gave to us was to have a completely new business to diversify her income stream. Okay. And so we kind of asked her, well, let's say we go through all the numbers that you have right now and you're on pace to do exactly what you want to do in life. Kids can go to college, you can retire when you want, all these things line up perfectly. Would you still want to be doing this job? What would this new job then allow you to do that you're not already on pace for? And as you probably have experienced before, if you ask a good question to a client, because they kind of pause, they move forward a little bit, and they kind of look up to the side, like, oh, okay, I know I asked a good one there. Yeah. And so she did that. And when we went through that whole thought process, she said, my businesses kind of run themselves at this point. I hate being just not doing anything. I hate being stagnant. This new area I'm actually really excited about. It'd be a new challenge, a new adventure. It would really be, inspiring and give me energy. And so great, if those are the reasons, then fantastic, let's do it. But now you at least know why you're doing it, So just by stopping and asking yourself those questions is really how we teach people. And then when we had, a couple of years in, when they come to a new thing, they come to us and they'll say, well, I thought about it, and I think that this is really what it'll allow me to do that I can't do now. And so that mentality starts kind of, get built in. So you ask those questions preemptively instead of just, reactively doing kind of what's self-programmed that you think you should be doing.
So it's about sort of challenging their reasons for making decisions. It's about sort of helping them with good questioning. Is that right? Is there anything more to it? Is there like a process you take them through, or is it just, you're obviously just a naturally gifted question asker?
Yeah, I think asking questions is the biggest thing. And I kind of alluded to this earlier. You have the ability to say no. Sure. And I think, people they technically know that, but they don't fully know that. As soon as you start saying, I have to, now you've taken away your ability to take a choice. So like there's a great book called Essentialism that kind of goes through all this. I don't know if you've read that or not, but
absolutely.
It goes through just, you have a choice of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And that, for everybody, that's a truth that I think people have to be taught
Yeah.
that is applicable for them. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Great book, Essentialism. Greg McKeown. I'm actually reading I'm not sure it's really the follow-up, but his most recent book called Effortless right now. So that was very timely.
Oh, okay. There you go.
The man is a great thinker. There's no question about that. So mindset it's all important, right? It should come first. When I have a Meaningful Academy, and in my foundations phase, the very first module is about mindset. It is about keeping money in its place, treating it as an enabler, not an end in itself, all that good stuff. But sooner or later, we're going to need to get practical, right? So with the mindset now is in place. So practically then, if we were to take a step down, if you like, or get more granular from there, what other kind of challenges are young families facing that you're dealing with day to day?
Yeah, so the two other main challenges that we see young families facing, the first is having some idea of kind of what path they're currently on. And the second part of it is having the protections in place that they should have for their families.
Sure.
So the first one, kind of jumping into the path that you're on, and the path that you're on kind of sounds ho-hum. So like from the episode I did on it, it's you may already be a future millionaire. So that's a little bit jazzier, Yep, nice. So what it basically deals with is when we have young families come in, a lot of times they might be great savers and they might be in a better position than they actually know that they're in. And so if you thought of like, okay, if I keep doing exactly what I'm doing now, no more, no less, I can hit on all my goals and I could retire on time or earlier, whatever it might be. How freeing would that be for you? What would that allow you to do today? You'd probably take extra vacations. You'd probably maybe do some kind of home improvement that would make your family lifestyle better for the next 30 years. So just having some idea, on that map, other than like, a blank map with a "You Are Here" sticker in the middle, that's not really so helpful. So one thing that people can do for themselves to try to get an idea of what path they're on is a tool that's called the Rule of 72. So essentially the Rule of 72, what it basically states is if you use an assumed rate of return, whatever that might be, and you divide it into 72, that'll be how long it takes for your money to double. So let's just say that we use 7% as that rate of return, and you have a portfolio that's diversified and spread out where that's a reasonable assumption to make. So 72 divided by 7 is roughly 10 years. So every 10 years, your money be doubling. So, let's say you have $125,000 saved up in your 30s because you've just done such a great job. You got out of school, you saved, got to this point, and you might be looking at your account being like, well, that's not bad, but, I have a long way to go. And you may not realize, okay, $125,000, 10 years from now in my 40s, that's $250, right? It doubles. Now, another 10 years into my 50s, that $250 doubles again. Now it's $500. Now, another 10 years, 50s to 60s, that $500 doubles again, and you're at $1 million. So you might be looking at $125,000 saying, oh, that's not so much. But that $125,000, when you're going to need it, when you retire, is actually really kind of like a future million. Sure. And so while that doesn't give you an exact, expenses and inflation, all that kind of stuff, if you look at it that way, it is freeing to some degree. You have some kind of path on that map now. And you might say, I have more put away than I really realized that I did for my future needs. And so that, again, now we get back to, okay, I'll maybe take an extra vacation and do a home improvement or whatever it might be. But that path, having some idea, and that exercise you went through, that takes all of 5 minutes to do. So that's the kind of the first thing that I would say is one of the main challenges for young families that they may not necessarily realize.
Yeah, I come across that all the time, and I don't know really why it surprises me, but most people have perhaps a reasonable sense of how much they have right now, but they're paying into retirement plans and they're paying into other investments or whatever, and it's very, very hard for people to see where that's going to end up, and that's what we as financial planners obviously can help them to visualize. I've yet to meet the person who can in their head, hold together all the threads of savings rates, growth rates, inflation rates, all that sort of stuff, and come up with, well, what might that actually look like when I'm 60 or whatever? And that's why you and I have a job. But if you can sow the seed of that and really get people excited that actually this is the path you're on, it'll get them excited about the future. But as you rightly say, it can free them up to perhaps make non-money decisions right now, or lifestyle or wellness decisions, which they might otherwise sort of hold back from because they think, well, that might actually impact on my journey. So that's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like you said, an advisor could probably give you, a very precise idea of kind of where you're headed or whatever. But even just the rule of 72,
Sure.
if you just get some, it doesn't have to be a really narrow path. Even if you get like a wider path, like you still have some kind of an idea. And it's all about just freeing yourself up to what everybody's goal is, to make life most enjoyable for themselves. That's what it's about. But
that can all be washed away in an instant, can't it? Without the other challenge or the other issue that young families face, and that's protection. So tell me about how you're addressing that and how that's sort of manifested with your young family clients.
Yeah, so that's 100% right. So, we're building this beautiful house. If the foundation is non-existent, then, the whole thing can come crumbling down. And we see so many families come in with inadequate protection when it comes to insurance. Sure. So life insurance being kind of the main one. And so most people, and I believe it's the same over there, you'll get some kind of protection through your work, 2 or 3 times salary, something like that. And so when you look at that number, it seems like a big number, right? So it might be 500,000 of protection for life insurance that I'm getting kind of through my employer. That's a lot of money. But then when you stop and think about, okay, now again, how does that money translate into what I would actually want to have happen? Okay, that's 3 years worth of my salary. Great. My family could stay where they are for 3 years, and then they're financially in a terrible spot. That's not a good answer. Nope. And, we've never had somebody come in and be like, oh, I just lost my spouse, and, they really had too much life insurance. That really put me in a bad spot, So, we've never had a survivor complain about having too much protection. Sure. So, and, I've never heard of any survivor doing that. So to understand that initial concept, and then why it's so powerful for younger people, is because if you're young and healthy, life insurance, ironically, is very, very affordable. So it's very cheap. So over here, I could get a $1-2 million policy for a family with the premium, that might be $100 a month or something like that, if they're young and healthy. And you think about your credit card bill, mine varies more than $100 a month. So you're not even really going to notice it 6 months from now, but now you have this protection in place where, if something, God forbid, were to happen to me, I have no worries financially that my kids are still going to be able to be saved for, that my spouse is still going to be able to retire and be taken care of. So it's just, minimal time, minimal effort, minimal money. And yet I would say 9.5 times out of 10, when we have young families come in, they don't have nearly enough protection for that kind of a scenario.
One of my sort of passions in life is helping people to do this themselves. Obviously, you and I have a job for those clients who want to delegate this and get help with this from a professional. But, we've never lived in better times for people to be able to take some of this stuff into their own hands. Do you think, or to what extent do you think that it's possible for young families to take the time and fix some of these things themselves?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of this they could do on their own. Like the first most important thing, the mindset, 100% you could do on your own. Just from listening to this, listening to you, what you've gone through before, the mindset you can change without anybody's help at all. The projections or some kind of path going forward, with the rule of 72, you can definitely give yourself some kind of an idea, some kind of a map. You're never going to be able to fully path it out, as well as, maybe an advisor could, but you could at least give yourself a very good confidence boost by doing that. The insurance part of it, I mean, you type in term insurance quotes and you'll get hit with like 100 different ads right in the face. So that's something online that has definitely opened up for people to be able to really access a lot more than they were in the past. So, a lot of before insurance, there was no internet. You had to go through somebody. But now this stuff is really digitized. So, I think a lot of this people can definitely get a much better grasp on themselves than they ever could before.
Okay, let me just take a little break here. I'll be back with Joe in just a second, but just to mention a couple of things. First thing, Joe talked about protection, and the best place I know here in the UK to get that sorted for you and your family is with Life Search. So that's meaningfulmoney.tv/life search. Those guys are the experts, and if you go through that link, you'll be dealing with their senior advisors. Yes, it's an affiliate arrangement, so Meaningful Money will get a cut if you end up doing business through them, but I've had universally superb feedback from anybody who has been to Life Search. So go check them out, meaningfulmoney.tv/life search. And then if you are wanting to learn more about how to manage your finances and really to learn this money mindset, then Meaningful Academy Financial Foundations is a great place to start. I'll put a link down here and in the show notes. Go check it out and maybe I'll see you on the inside. I love the fact that the internet is a great sort of democratizer of this stuff. It used to be so often the preserve of those who could afford advice or those who were already wealthy or whatever, but now it really is. There's so many great options. So let's just pivot a little bit, Joe, if we can. And you began a podcast fairly recently. This is the Enjoy More 30s Family Finance Podcast. So tell me a little bit about, why you did that. Why start a podcast?
Yeah, so the answer is pretty simple. I started a podcast because I love podcasts, and people my age seem to like podcasts, my demographic. So, when I was thinking of how can I help fill this void, the first thing I did was I searched, young family finance and, the podcast apps that I use, and essentially nothing came up. And I said, well, there needs to be something that comes up for people here. And so that's why I jumped into the podcast space. And people like yourself, and there's a lot of other people out there as well that provide a lot more resources and guidance, so that I was able to get up and running and jump into it much more quickly than you probably were when you were inventing the medium.
Not quite, but it was a long time ago. But there was some people doing it a long time before me. But back in 2005 and stuff, when you had to write your own RSS feed, I can't imagine what that must have been like. But you hit me up on Twitter, and we had conversations as a result of that. So I'm delighted that you're up and running and have managed to do that quite quickly. Are you seeing some benefits from it?
We've seen some benefits, business-wise or whatever, but really the biggest impact is just being able to connect with more people, connect in a different way. When I go to my chiropractor's office and he goes like, hey, I listened to that episode and man, I never thought of it that way. Like that that opened up my mind. It's so fulfilling. To be able to impact people, that they're letting you into their personal space, right into their ear, allowing you to talk to them directly. It's just, it's amazing the impact that you have. And then, yourself and other people that I get to connect with, the community, it's just been fantastic being able to make more connections and impact more people's lives.
Amazing. How long has the podcast been running?
It's launched at the beginning of February. So we're at like 4 months or so here.
If you've already seen business benefits from it in 4 months, then the future is extremely bright. I tell you, it took me 18 months to pick up a first client. Back, obviously, there were fewer people doing it then, and this is from YouTube. It took 18 months of creating videos 3 times a week to pick up my first client to my practice here. But now, Meaningful Money sends between 2/3 and 3/4 of all our new inquiries here, and we're running a waiting list. So if you're picking up business in the first 3 or 4 months, man, then the future is extremely bright indeed, and I wish you all the best with it. If you can get past 7 episodes, they reckon you're in it for the long haul, so you're already well past that milestone, so that's very cool.
You got it. I had 2 years worth of content that I built up first because everybody says you have to have a pretty long runway here. So I'm ready. I'm committed, and whatever comes out of it, I know that I'm helping some people out there, and that's just fantastic.
That's reason enough to do it. I'm always amazed and bemused by the business benefits, which were not even in my mind when I began. So it's just amazing that that's become a very pleasing side effect of the whole thing. But for me, as with you, Joe, I know it's the spreading the message, which is really the point, and helping as many people as possible. So more power to you. Joe, thanks for your time, man. Where can people find out more about you and the podcast and New Horizons and all that sort of stuff, everything that you're up to? Where should they go?
Sure. Yeah. So, obviously the podcast is a great place to start checking that out. So Enjoy More 30s 30S on all your major apps and everything. Obviously on LinkedIn, Twitter, all the normal sources as well. So, happy to connect and help with anybody that I'm able to.
Perfect. I'll make sure there's links to all that. So all those social links, and obviously to the podcast and your website, Joe, in the show notes under the video here. And thank you so much for joining me, man. All power to you, and keep in touch.
Yeah. Thanks very much again, Pete, for having me. And happy to be here and helping people out in impacting the world here.
Okay, there you go. My thanks to Joe, as ever, for his insight Always good to connect with a kindred spirit from a different continent. That was hard to say all of a sudden. Isn't it an amazing time to be alive, though? We can connect like this. I haven't got to embark on a weeks-long journey to make a connection with somebody like Joe. So, Joe, thank you so much for your time. Okay, so next time, I'm chatting with a great friend of mine, Andy Hart, of the MeaningfulMoney podcast, all about risk profiling and why the industry has got it all wrong. Last time I chatted to Andy, if you were there for that one, we made some people mad. So let's see how we get on next week. I'm about to do some 1-star reviews, so let's hope not. But it should be a great session. So that is it, though, for this week's Meaningful Money podcast. I hope it was helpful. My thanks again to Joe Okaly of New Horizons Wealth Management for his time. Any questions or comments or to connect with Joe, go to meaningfulmoney.tv/session421. Hope you enjoyed it, though, folks. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next time.